Hi, this is Ed Jorgensen. In the March outlook that I just posted, I made a comment how hard it was to perceive a bubble, to predict it, to even recognize that you're in it or not in it. And I used as an example the 25th anniversary of the crash of '29 in late 1954, when economists and professional investors took a look at the market as it then stood and feared that there was another bubble underway. Turned out not to be true. I'd like to go over what they saw and then how a computer with today's data power, how artificial intelligence or a robot, how mechanical database systems would have viewed the market in 1954. So let's take a look. So we're looking at the beginnings of the post-war rally and how it is that all the experts in November of 1954 thought that we were replaying the great crash of '29. Just to set the scene, remember that in those early years after World War II, 1945 to 1950, our military returned home and went back to we demilitarized and went back to a civilian economy. The market was essentially flat for most of those years. The Korean War broke out in 1950, and we remilitarized, and the market went up slightly. And then as the Korean War peace in 1953, we had a great post-Korean War rally, 1953 to 1955, with Eisenhower as president. And that brought us to the end of 1954, 25 years after the crash of '29. And as a commemoration of the crash of '29, Congress held hearings on whether it could happen again. Among those testifying, as I mentioned, was John Kenneth Galbraith, who had just published his famous book, The Great Crash of 1929. And he said that the market looked dangerously speculative, dangerously like a repeat of 1929. He was not the only expert called before Congress, and they all agreed that the market was high, the market was dangerous. That was the sentiment. So there are the experts testifying in 1954 about a likely crash. And what happened? What happened was 10 years of the most amazing market rally of all time, with the market up 150% in 10 years. I mean, there were corrections along the way, but each of those corrections was short-lived. I mean, scary when they happened and whatever, but there was no replay of the Great Depression. So the experts got it wrong. Investors at the time got it wrong. Commentators got it wrong. How would a computer using today's modeling have done? Would artificial intelligence do better? Would a robot do better? All these are systems that use massive amounts of data to compare markets and market fundamentals and market patterns and see and attempt to forecast based on the past. Okay, so here's the model. This is a model I wrote, but it's good, and it's exactly what you would get from artificial intelligence or a robot today. Now, this is how you would look at the markets standing in late 1954 using the data of the post-World War I rally, the Roaring '20s, the Great Depression, the recovery from the Great Depression, World War II, the recovery from World War II. If you use that data and you generate a classic market timing model, indeed, you would have said in late 1954 that the market was high. And that's the green line. The green line is the upper end of a range that a computer would say encompasses 2/3 of likely market prices. And the orange line is the bottom of that range. So there you see the model accurately saying that by 1927-28, the market is speculative and is dangerously speculative by 1929. Then it crashes. But by 1932, it's abnormally low, right? And that is a correct description. So using the data at the time, I think that the computer gives us a pretty good model, a pretty good description of what's going on. And there we are in late 1954, and the computer says, wow, just like the experts, the computer says, wow, we're crossing the line into speculation. Yeah, well, it didn't happen. So I've taken the computer lines, the computer models that you saw from 1905 to 1955, and I've extended them to the following decades that we've lived through. And you see that the computer model, while great for the 1920s, stops working. You'll see that it misses, as the experts did, the great rally through 1965. I mean, what's the point? The entire market from 1955 to just about, actually that's 1973, the entire market for 20 years is above the range that the computer says likely. And then again, look at our recent period. The entire market from 1995 on, now 20 years, is completely above the range that computer model from the Roaring Twenties and the Depression and the post-Depression recovery says are likely. So the model's wrong. Now, it's right as to the past, but it was wrong as to the future. And that's the problem with all modeling, economic modeling, stock market modeling. Models work with data known to date. But in fundamental ways, the world changes. In the 50s and early 60s, the US was emerging in the post-war era as the leading nation of the world, and the market soared reflecting it. In the last 20 years, the U.S. has adopted a policy of extremely low interest rates, and it has juiced every asset price. The models would pick that up as speculative, but the speculation goes on for 20 years. So what's the point of the model? This is somebody else's model here with all sorts of trend lines and predictions, all of which, it's a wonderful model. It just happens not to be accurate. So look, in this business, we all try to look so certain, and there I am trying to be certain. But certainty is an illusion. It's true for economists, professional investors. You know, it's also true for computers, artificial intelligence, and robots. Circumstances change, and you have to continually evaluate your models, continually evaluate what they're saying as the possibilities are, and try as best you can to put new data into them. And in the future, I'll give you some models of today, which are give you different boundaries and different predictions from those models from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and early 50s. And we'll take a look and see what the possibilities are. So thanks for listening. Be well. Ed Jorgensen.